Hello and welcome back to Scale War Machines, and after a short absence I return with this, a tutorial all about painting a famous character from history and from the miniseries Band of Brothers. Stay tuned to find out how I got on. As you know, on Scale War Machines I like to dabble in all sorts of different subjects, and figures are also an area of interest, particularly airborne troops. So when I received this in 2015 I was taken aback by the quality of the moulding. It's a reference from Nuts Planet and I was sent it by Hysterex agents. I'll put up on screen the reference number of this particular kit if you're interested. In 2015 I uploaded a full review of this wonderful release and other releases by Nuts Planet to the channel, and in 2016 I set about building and painting it. This for me was a chance to use a new paint range, or new to me. I was just getting to grips with Lifecolor paints, so the idea was to build this up and capture the famous actor Damian Lewis, who portrayed the legendary figure from history, Dick Winter's character from Band of Brothers and from the Stephen Ambrose books and from our telly screens, and make an exciting, culturally significant model in resin. To do this we'll need the standard tools that you've seen a number of times on the channel and which I regularly use to make these resin busts or figurines. We saw a moment ago various motor tools, but principally what I'll be using are little razor saws and scalpels initially, and that's to remove the moulding plugs that are so common on these resin productions. So having sawn off most of the stubs, I could also redefine some of the mould lines and details on the rifle using this curved scalpel blade, which you can see here. I then ended up with quite a few accessories that were cleaned up. And of course, once all the finicky bits have been tidied up, I can use a motorised bench sander to clean up the larger chunks of resin, in this case the torso. Any finer bits could be tidied up with a motor tool with a small sanding disc. I could then proceed around all the different components, and there are quite a few in the box. This is really a well-stocked kit with loads of accessories. As you can see, the scalpel was used as well. Now, one of the things that I really liked was how accurate the rendering was of Damian Lewis, the actor who played Dick Winters, and that meant I was raring to go, and I was very excited about building and painting this model. With so many components there was still quite a bit of cleanup, including some odd shapes, but when it was all done it was time to get rid of all the resin dust. Now remember, your resin dust is very dangerous, so you should wear a mask when doing all this, and get rid of any loose dust that's lying around. Here you can see I've organised all the pieces and they're all cleaned up and it's ready for construction. For this, as it's resin, of course, you'll be using a form of superglue or cyanoacrylate, in this case from the Rocket range by Deluxe Materials. I started building up the model using the various viscosities of superglue from that manufacturer. I've used these for years and they're excellent. That allowed me to attach the arms, and also, as you can see, I drilled and pinned the head and helmet, and that was just to ensure that they would go together and glue permanently together when done. You will have noticed I test fitted earlier the head to the torso, and here I am just test fitting everything, including the helmet, to the head. Here I am using the highly runny or low viscosity glue from the Rocket range, the red one called Rocket Hot, and that just flowed in quite nicely. There are some gaps and I was thinking about filling them with epoxy sculpt, but in the end I turned to an old favourite, the Tamiya White Putty, just a standard model putty that's quite useful. It's got good gap filling capacity and it blends down nicely with acetone. Here you can see me grabbing a bit of acetone, of course wearing a mask, and what I like about this method is it allows you to smooth everything down without the need for sanding. Just take an old brush, dab it in the acetone and very carefully smooth out the putty you'd applied previously. As you can see here, it waters it down or dilutes it very well and fills all your gaps. Still got one more to do on this side, so I apply a bit more putty and repeat the process. Now, we're moving on to painting. So as I said, I was quite new to Lifecolors, and this was my second figurine using this paint range. It's an excellent paint range and I use it continually since. But this was a chance for me to put all these different lovely sets where they group all these different references together and use them on a single bust. Here's just a selection of the paints I used. As per usual, I also put up on screen the individual paint references and box sets, so you can get them yourself. I was also sent some of this, their primer, and that was sent by airbrushes.com, so don't forget you can get all these Lifecolor references from them. Strictly speaking, you don't need to primer your models, but I find it's always good practice, and this was a chance to try out this new primer that I hadn't used before. I was going to be doing it with a suitable airbrush, in this case the TR2 by Iwata. I like using a primer because it shows up any defects, holes that you need to fill, or problems with the casting, which of course is a risk with low production run resin items. I like the way it also shows up any detritus or dust on the model as well, and that's a good way to make sure you get a clean finish, as you'll see later. The Sidefeed Iwata airbrush was perfect for applying this kind of thicker primer. If you find it's going on too thick, you can of course dilute it using the Lifecolor thinners. I gave it a couple of good coats, making sure there's plenty of coverage, and let it dry just a short period in between. A spray booth is obviously a good idea for this, as well as wearing a mask just to keep the fumes away. All that wonderful detail and the excellent sculpting shows up fantastically under a good coat of primer, even if there's still a bit of work you need to do for a perfect finish. There we have it, there's the result of the Iwata HP TR2 spraying the Lifecolor acrylic primer neat out of the bottle. Coverage is excellent, you can see it there. Sure, there are a few imperfections, but that's the whole idea of the primer coat, to spot them. That's all dust and muck that was there before. And what we'll do is remove those, and then we'll have a uniform finish for painting. Just take a sharp scalpel blade and pick off any little flecks or specks of dust that you find around the model. You can also use an airbrush or air blower to blow away any debris. Here we have it, the bust torso is ready, and it's time to think about painting. Now, in this video I'm going to focus on painting the face, which is one of the most enjoyable parts of figure painting if you ask me. What I will do is I'll bundle all the face painting stages together in this video, which means it will be slightly out of sequence of how I proceeded. What I tend to do is go simultaneously between the face and the uniform in different stages. But for simplicity, I'll show you how I painted this figure, and in particular how I approached the pale skin and red hair of the actor Damian Lewis. Step 1 then is to pick out the eyes, and to do that I used a dark brown shade from their leather set and very carefully started on one eyeball, tried to get the centre point, made a rough round shape and moved on to the other eyeball. Now the key here is to get the look or the gaze of the figure right as early as possible, and also you want a fair and equal distance between the eyeballs so it looks natural. The key to this is just to proceed slowly, compare, tilt the head regularly, and just build up that brown blob of the eyeball as neatly as possible. Now don't worry too much if you make a mess, you can of course rectify it, but the key really is that equidistance between the eyeballs and the gaze of the figurine. Here you can see how it looks after a few minutes of painting. I'm pretty happy with that, and the next stage I do is mixing up a slightly warmer brown shade is to pick out the contours or the boundaries of the eye. This is a bit like mascara or makeup, and what I'm trying to do is frame the eyeballs and the eyes and get the territory of the eye marked out so I know, and that's going to become important later on when I go to the flesh colours. You can see that I've just framed the eyes here, and the paint's quite thin. The purpose here is just to set out the boundaries of the eye. Now it just so happened in one of their weapon sets they had a lovely blue colour, and I decided to use that as the colour of the eyes. I'm about 99% sure Damian Lewis has blue eyes, although I'm not certain, but certainly it looked good and captured the nature of the character. So the first step was to use the dark colour and paint over the brown eyeballs that I'd marked out earlier. Fairly quickly I moved on then to pick out the centre of the eyeball with a lightened version, and there you can see the lighter shade that I used. I was able to just pick out the colours here and get that lightened highlight. I hadn't actually painted the pupil at this stage, there was just enough of the dark blue in the centre to mark out where the pupil will be. This allowed me, as I was pretty happy with that, to proceed very quickly to the flesh shades. In this case I used their flesh set and I mixed up a dark colour that had a dark flesh tone mixed with a bit of red, and that allowed me to paint up to and including the brownish boundary I'd painted earlier. Because this is going to be a pale skinned subject, it's really quite easy just to put on thin coats of the base layer, the flesh first base in this case from the set, and just get even thin coverage over the whole of the face. There's no point rushing, you can pick it out, and here you can see that I've painted over the boundaries of the eye, and I'm not too worried that's even a bit untidy there, but I know I can rectify that later. Then unusually I turn to the airbrush. This is not something I do always, but I thought I'd try airbrushing these paints and just see if it put on a nice flat flesh base onto the figurine, and indeed it did work well. This is where I'm at with just one coat of the flesh first base on the face. As you can see in the background, items like the uniform and the accessories such as the rifle have been progressing. I'll cover that in the next video, but what I'm doing here is I'm choosing a orangey colour that I got from the leather set, and I'm using that to paint the hair. At this stage I'm just blocking out the colours, but you'll see it's important to get the right sort of shade for someone with light skin and red hair. I can then progress to highlights, which I do by adding this cream or tan colour to the mix. I'll put the reference on screen, and that was applied picking out individual strands or indeed as a dry brush over the top of the previous orange colour, and that got me my ginger hair or red head that I was after. Don't gloop the paint on, just apply repeated thin coats, almost transparent, semi-transparent, especially for the eyebrows. That adds real definition to the face, and you'll notice that with a light-skinned person, there's no need to go crazy with highlights, or at least that's my opinion. The flesh can remain flatter or more uniform. That said, I did proceed to the highlight coat. I was just going to make sure that the difference between them wasn't that striking or too obvious. And here you can see me using this reference. I start off by picking out the brow or any areas of the face that jut forwards and therefore catch the light. This also applies to the neck, so any vein detail or the Adam's apple, that is also picked out in the second highlight colour. The set from Lifecolor makes it very easy to work your way through all these different shades. By this stage I'm on the second highlight, again reference on screen, and because it's a pale skinned character I find it easier to rattle through the highlights and just keep a flatter appearance, less contrasty on the face, and that then captures the pale skin nature of the subject. Here I am picking out details of the face like the wrinkle lines around the mouth. This again can be done with the second highlight and a bit of shadow mix for the recesses, and using thin repeated coats I'm just going over cheekbones and areas of natural highlight. This is how it looks at this stage. I do a test fit with the paratrooper helmet, and I also check and make sure that the head fits nicely and looks good when it's dry fitted on the torso. Okay, that's enough for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you tune in for the next video where I'll be covering all the painting of the uniform and the accessories. I'll be using the same paint range but combining techniques like airbrushing with liquid pigments and shadow and highlight techniques, including detail painting of things like accessories. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel, and thanks for bearing with me as I took a bit of time out to have a break from YouTube. But we'll be resuming soon with this really super enjoyable figure. I had a great time painting it, and as you'll see in future episodes, I also had some ideas around how I could improve what I achieved in 2016 and update this figurine. So until the next time, goodbye.
Subscribe for our latest videos.